My name is Liam. I am an architect. I build things that are meant to last. Foundations support beams, structures that can withstand storms. 3 years ago, I was building a life with a woman named Clara. I thought our foundation was solid. I thought we could withstand anything. The final invoice for my foolishness was my public humiliation, broadcast for the world to see. They called it a prank, a Halloween joke. They laughed while they destroyed me. They did not understand one thing. An architect knows how to build. He also knows the precise points to press to make a structure collapse. This is the story of how I took everything from them, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the rubble of their own making. My story with Clara started, as many do, with a simple meeting. We were introduced through mutual friends at a gallery opening. She was vibrant, funny, and seemed to hang on my every word when I talked about building design. I was captivated. Clara worked in social media marketing, a world I barely understood. Her life was a curated collection of perfect moments, beautiful meals, and exotic locations. I designed buildings meant to stand for a century. She designed posts meant to last for a day. I thought our differences were a strength. I thought my stability grounded her, and her spontaneity lifted me. We dated for 2 years. They were good years. I fell in love with her energy and the way she made every small event feel like a grand celebration. When I proposed, I did it on a hike overlooking the city. I had a small, pumpkin-shaped box custom-made for the ring because she loved Halloween more than any other holiday. It was her favorite thing. She said yes. She cried. She posted a perfectly framed photo of the ring on her hand, my face artfully blurred in the background. The caption read, "Building my future with my architect." It got over 50,000 likes. Her family was wealthy. New money, earned through her father Richard's aggressive real estate developments. He was a loud, imposing man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. Her brother, Evan, was a carbon copy of his father, but without the thin veneer of charm. He looked at me with open disdain, like I was a piece of furniture that did not match the decor. Clara's mother was quiet, a perfectly manicured woman whose main role was to agree with her husband. They lived in a mansion that felt more like a corporate headquarters than a home. It was cold, modern, and decorated with art that was expensive but soulless. It was the kind of house I would never design. Despite my reservations about her family, I loved Clara. I believed she was different. She talked about wanting a real life away from the constant pressure of her family's expectations. I thought I was her escape. I thought she was mine. We decided on a wedding date, October 30th, the day before Halloween. It was her dream, a massive, elegant, Gothic-themed wedding. I poured myself into the planning. I wanted to give her the perfect day. I see now that I was just the lead contractor on my own demolition project. I was building the stage for my own execution. The wedding planning consumed us. Clara wanted everything to be an experience, something her followers would talk about for months. The venue was a historic estate with stone walls and sprawling ancient trees. We had designers create a dark, romantic atmosphere with deep reds, blacks, and golds. My contribution was the lighting design. I used my architectural software to map out how shadows would fall, how candlelight would reflect off the Gothic arches. I wanted it to be beautiful, not gaudy. Her family was involved in every decision, mostly by writing checks and making demands. Richard insisted on a specific, outrageously expensive caterer. Evan made endless jokes about how I probably could not afford the postage for the invitations. I swallowed my pride. I told myself it was just their way. I focused on Clara. When we were alone, things felt normal. We would sit on the floor of my apartment, eating takeout and looking at blueprints for the house we planned to build. In those moments, I believed in us. I saw the future we were designing together. A week before the wedding, the stress was palpable. Final fittings, vendor calls, seating chart arguments. Richard and Evan were becoming more brazen in their condescension. At a family dinner, Richard looked over my financial statement for our mortgage application and laughed. "Is this a monthly or annual income, Liam?" he asked, winking at Evan. Clara squeezed my hand under the table. "Dad, be nice," she said, but she was smiling. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the foundation, but I noted it. I filed it away. Architects are trained to notice stress fractures. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived. It was October 29th, a crisp autumn evening. The event was held in a private room at an exclusive downtown restaurant. The theme was Till Death Do Us Part, a morbid but stylish affair. 200 guests were there. Friends, family, business associates of Richard. It felt less like a celebration of our love and more like a networking event for him. I stood by the entrance, greeting people, my smile feeling stiff and unnatural. Evan slapped me on the back a little too hard. "Big night, buddy," he said. "Don't mess it up." Clara looked stunning in a black velvet dress. She drifted through the room, a whirlwind of air kisses and perfectly angled selfies. She barely looked at me. I felt a growing sense of unease, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Sam, my best friend and best man, stood beside me. "You okay?" he asked, sensing my tension. "This is a lot," I nodded. "Just want to get through tonight," I said. "Tomorrow is what matters." Sam gave me a supportive look. "Tomorrow will be great," he assured me. Neither of us knew that for me, tomorrow would never come. The night was still young, and the main event, my personal horror show, was just about to begin. Dinner was a blur of speeches and polite applause. Richard gave a toast that was more about his latest business deal than about his daughter or me. He called me a solid, dependable boy, and then made a joke about hopping my buildings were stronger than my stock portfolio. The room laughed. I laughed along, the sound catching in my throat. I felt like an actor in a play where I had not been given the script. Clara was at the head table, filming everything on her phone, a radiant smile plastered on her face. After the dessert plates were cleared, Evan tapped a glass for attention. He had a microphone in his hand and a cruel glint in his eye. "All right, everyone," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "We all know Clara loves Halloween. She loves movies, she loves a good scare. So we thought we'd give our dear Liam a little pre-wedding fright, a final test to see if he's really man enough to join the family." My stomach dropped. I looked at Clara. She gave me a thumbs up and mouthed the words, "Just play along." The lights in the room suddenly went out. A few people gasped. Then a single blood-red spotlight hit me where I stood. A low, growling sound echoed from the speakers. It was cheesy, like something from a low-budget haunted house. I forced a nervous smile. I thought it was just going to be someone in a cheap monster costume. I could handle that. I could play along. Two of Evan's friends, dressed in black, grabbed my arms. They were strong and their grip was not playful. They half-dragged me to the center of the room. From the main entrance, a figure emerged, covered in a ragged cloak. It staggered forward, moaning. The whole thing felt staged and ridiculous. I looked for Clara in the darkness, hopping to catch her eye to share a moment of "Can you believe this?" But I could not see her. The figure got closer. The growling got louder. The guests were all filming with their phones, their screens creating a sea of small, cold lights in the dark. Then the cloaked figure threw back its hood. It was Evan. He was holding a large metal bucket. He grinned at me, a wide, predatory smile. "Trick or treat, Liam," he said. Before I could react, he upended the bucket over my head. I was instantly drenched in a thick, sticky, cold liquid. It smelled metallic and sweet. Pig's blood, that was my first thought. It was just like the scene from the movie Carrie. The book and movie Clara and I had watched together just a month earlier. She had told me it was her favorite horror film. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a simple prank. This was calculated. This was cruel. The room erupted in laughter. Not just a few chuckles, but a wave of deep, mocking laughter from 200 people. The main lights flashed on, bright and blinding. I stood there, dripping with fake blood, in my ruined suit, in the center of a circle of laughing faces and raised phones. I blinked, trying to clear the sticky liquid from my eyes. The laughter was a physical force, pressing in on me from all sides. I saw faces. Richard laughing so hard he was wiping tears from his eyes. Evan puffed up with pride, taking a bow. And then I saw Clara. She was standing by the head table, her phone held high, recording everything. She was not laughing. She was watching me with a look of cold, clinical assessment, like I was a failed experiment. In that moment, The entire world narrowed to her face. The love I felt for her curdled into something cold and heavy in my chest. "What's wrong, Liam?" Evan's voice boomed over the microphone again. "Can't you take a joke? Don't be a baby." He walked over and wiped a smear of the fake blood from my cheek with his thumb. "See, it's not real, just like your place in this family." The laughter spiked again. My entire body was shaking, a mixture of rage, humiliation, and profound shock. I felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on me, but I could only see hers. I needed to see a flicker of regret, of empathy. There was nothing. I finally found my voice. It came out as a low rasp. "Clara," I said, a desperate one-word question. I was asking why. I was asking, is this really who you are? She lowered her phone slowly. She walked towards me, the crowd parting for her like she was royalty. She stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, Liam," she said, her voice clear and steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I just can't marry a man who has no sense of humor. We're done." She placed her engagement ring on a nearby table, next to a centerpiece of dead roses. She turned and walked away without a backward glance. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the laughter. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of pity and scorn. Then someone started to clap. Soon others joined in. They were applauding her. They were applauding my destruction. Evan put his arm around my shoulders. "Tough break, man," he said, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "But hey, you're free now. We'll even pay for your dry cleaning." He steered me towards the exit, his friends flanking us. I did not resist. My legs felt like lead. My mind was a white noise of static. They pushed me out the back door into the cold night air. The door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the alleyway shivering, covered in the sticky mess, the sounds of the party still faintly audible through the walls. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification. Clara had just posted a video. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle the joke. Wedding prank # dodged a bullet Halloween." I opened it. It was me, drenched, confused, broken. The view count was already climbing. 10,000. 20,000. 50,000. I watched the numbers rise, each one another nail in my coffin. I slid down the brick wall and sat on the cold, damp pavement, and for the first time in my adult life, I had no idea what to do next. I do not remember how I got home. I think I walked. The miles passed in a blur of streetlights and passing cars. People stared. A few pointed. One person asked if I was okay. I did not answer. I unlocked the door to my apartment, the one Clara and I had picked out together. Her things were already gone. Her closet was empty. The photos of us on the mantelpiece were gone. The only thing left was a single dead rose on my pillow, a final theatrical gesture. They had not just planned the prank. They had planned the entire extraction. The next few days are a black hole in my memory. I called my family and told them the wedding was off. I did not give them details. I could not bring myself to say the words. I told my boss I needed time off. I turned off my phone. The video was everywhere. Friends sent me links telling me how horrible it was. Strangers sent me messages, some of pity, most of mockery. I was a meme. The blood-soaked groom. The pranked architect. My face was a symbol of public humiliation. Sam was the only person I let in. He came over and found me sitting in the dark, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from that night. I had not showered. I wanted to feel the sticky residue on my skin. I wanted the physical reminder of the pain because it was the only thing that felt real. Sam did not say much. He just cleaned my apartment. He threw out the dead rose. He ordered food I did not eat. He sat with me in the silence. One evening, about a week after it happened, he finally spoke. "You need to fight back, Liam," he said softly. "You can't let them win." I shook my head. "Win, Sam, they've already won. They took my dignity. They took my future. What is there to fight for?" "Yourself," he said, his voice firm. "You fight for yourself. You can sue them, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, something." I almost laughed. "Sue them. Richard owns half the judges in this city. They would bury me in legal fees. They would make it even worse." Sam sighed. He knew I was right. The system was not built for people like me to win against people like them. "So what?" he asked. "You're just going to let them get away with it. You're going to let that video be the last word on who you are." I did not have an answer. The anger was there, a cold, hard stone in my gut, but it was buried under a mountain of shame and grief. I felt powerless. I felt like the entire world had seen me at my absolute weakest, and I could never undo that. The Liam who planned weddings and designed buildings was gone. In his place was a ghost, haunted by the laughter of 200 people. I did not know it yet, but that ghost was about to learn how to fight. Weeks turned into a month. I existed in a gray fog. I returned to work, but my focus was gone. I would stare at blueprints for hours, the lines blurring into meaningless squiggles. My colleagues were kind but cautious around me, as if I were a fragile object that might shatter. They had all seen the video. I could feel their pity, their second-hand embarrassment. It was like a physical cloak I wore everywhere. I lost weight. Sleep was a luxury, and when it came, it was filled with nightmares of flashing cameras and echoing laughter. I started following them online. Not Clara, I could not bring myself to look at her page, but I watched her family. I created an anonymous account and scrolled through their lives. They were thriving. The video had made them notorious, but in their circle, notoriety was a currency. Richard closed a massive new development deal. Evan was featured in a lifestyle magazine as one of the city's most daring bachelors. Their social media was a victory lap. There were photos from exclusive parties, trips on private jets, celebratory dinners. There was no sign of remorse. There was no consequence. They had moved on without a scratch, while I was left picking up the pieces of a life they had detonated for sport. One night I was scrolling through Evan's feed. He had posted a picture of himself and Richard on a golf course, both of them holding cigars and grinning. The caption read, "Closing deals and breaking fools. Some people can't handle the heat." My hands started to shake. It was not grief anymore. It was not shame. It was rage, a pure, cold, clarifying rage. It burned away the fog in my mind. Sam was wrong. The legal system was not the answer. Fighting them on their terms in the open was a fool's errand. They controlled the narrative. They had the money and the power. But I had something they did not. I had knowledge. I had spent 2 years inside their world. I had listened to their drunken conversations. I had seen Richard's business documents left on his home office desk. I had helped Clara edit her social media posts, so I understood the algorithms and the language of that world. And I had my own skills. I am an architect. I see systems. I understand how structures work. I know how to find the load-bearing walls. I know where the stress points are. A building, a family, a business empire, they are all just structures, and any structure can be brought down. That night I opened my laptop. I created a new secure email address and a new anonymous social media profile. I bought a burner phone. I started a document. At the top I wrote 3 names: Richard, Evan, Clara. This would not be a lawsuit. This would be a demolition. A quiet, patient, and precise demolition. They wanted a Halloween prank. I would give them a haunting that would last the rest of their lives. The ghost they created was no longer hiding. He was ready to get to work. My first move was small. It had to be. A premature, aggressive attack would be traced back to me immediately. I needed to establish a pattern of misfortune that seemed random, disconnected from me. I needed to become a ghost in their machine. My target was their social standing. It was the thing they valued most, the fragile ecosystem of whispers, appearances, and reputation that kept them afloat. I started with the thing I knew best, their house. During my time with Clara, Richard had often boasted about his smart home system, a network that controlled everything from the lights to the security cameras. He was proud of it but technologically inept. I remembered him complaining that the default passwords were too complicated, so he had the installer change them to something memorable. I gambled on his arrogance. I tried his birthday. No luck. I tried Clara's birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the name of his first major development project, Veridia Plaza. Bingo, I was in. I did not do anything destructive. Not yet, I just watched. From my small apartment I had a god's eye view of their mansion. I could see them moving through the rooms. I could see the staff coming and going. I listened. The system had microphones intended for voice commands. I heard their arguments, their banal conversations, their casual cruelty to the people who served them. I started a log documenting everything. The dates, the times, the words. After 2 weeks of observation, I made my move. Clara was an aspiring influencer. Her brand was authentic luxury. She posted about wellness, high-end fashion, and positivity. It was a complete sham. I had listened to her berate her assistant, mock her followers, and complain about the chore of creating content. I decided to introduce a little chaos into her curated world. Using my anonymous social media account, I started a thread on a popular local gossip forum. The title was, "The Real Lives of City Elite." I did not mention her name. I just described a prominent local influencer who lived in a specific well-known neighborhood. I posted a transcript of a conversation I had recorded where Clara complained about receiving a gifted handbag that was last season's model. "Can you believe the nerve?" she had shrieked at her mother. "It's insulting. It's like they're giving me their garbage." The post was anonymous, but the details were specific enough. People in her circle knew. The post took off. Commenters started guessing who it could be. Within hours, someone named her. The thread exploded. Other anonymous accounts, likely former employees or spurned acquaintances, began adding their own stories. Tales of her arrogance, her cheapness, her mistreatment of service staff. By the next day, it was the talk of the town. Her brand of authentic luxury was tainted. The ghost had thrown the first stone, and the ripples were just beginning to spread. I watched her follower count dip for the first time in years. It was a small victory, but it was a start. The social media attack had unsettled them, but it was not enough. It was gossip, easily dismissed by their inner circle as the ramblings of jealous haters. I needed to escalate. My next target was Evan. Evan's entire identity was built on being a bad boy bachelor, a charming rogue who was irresistible to women. It was a carefully crafted image, supported by his father's money. In reality, he was a clumsy predator, and I had seen it firsthand. During a family party one summer, I had witnessed Evan cornering one of the catering staff, a young woman who looked terrified. He was leaning in close, his hand on her arm, whispering something. She was shaking her head. I started to walk over, but Clara pulled me back. "Leave it," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's just being Evan." I never forgot the look of fear on that woman's face. I spent weeks searching for her. It was difficult. I only knew her first name, Maria, and the catering company she worked for. I finally found her through a former employee of the company I connected with on a professional networking site. I reached out to her using my secure email, explaining that I was a journalist investigating workplace harassment in the service industry. I never used my real name. I told her I had a source who mentioned an incident involving Evan at a party 2 years ago. I asked if she would be willing to speak anonymously. She was hesitant at first. She was afraid of what Richard's family could do to her. I did not push. I just told her that her story deserved to be heard and that I would protect her identity completely. A week later, she replied. She told me everything. It was worse than I had thought. Evan had not just been aggressive. He had threatened to have her fired if she did not go out with him. He had harassed her with texts for weeks after the event. She had quit her job to get away from him. I now had a credible first-hand account, but one story could be dismissed. I needed a pattern. I used the same method to find 2 other women who had similar experiences with him. One was a former intern at his father's company. The other was a bartender at a club he frequented. Their stories were chillingly similar, a pattern of harassment, threats, and abuse of power. I compiled their accounts into a detailed article. I wrote it carefully, stripping out any identifying details about the women, but leaving in the verifiable facts about the times, places, and Evan's specific behaviors. I sent the finished piece from a public library computer, using my anonymous email, to Anna, a well-known investigative journalist in the city who had a reputation for taking on powerful figures. I attached no name, no demands, just the story. The subject line was simple, a pattern of behavior. I hit send. Then I erased my digital footprint and walked away. The ghost had planted the seed. Now I just had to wait for it to grow in the dark. 3 weeks later, Anna's article was published on the front page of the city's leading online news journal. The headline was stark: "Power, Privilege, and Harassment. Multiple women accuse real estate heir of misconduct." It did not name Evan directly in the headline, but his picture was right below it. The article was a bombshell. It laid out the pattern of behavior in meticulous detail, citing 3 separate, anonymous sources whose stories corroborated each other perfectly. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Evan. The lifestyle magazine that had celebrated him as a daring bachelor pulled the feature from their website. Brands that had partnered with him for social media promotions cut ties publicly. The board of a charity he sat on, a position his father had bought for him, asked for his resignation. His carefully crafted public image was shattered overnight. He was no longer a charming rogue. He was a predator. I watched the implosion from the safety of my apartment. Evan released a statement denying the baseless allegations and calling it a smear campaign orchestrated by jealous rivals. No one believed him. Richard's army of lawyers threatened to sue the News Journal for defamation, but Anna and her publication stood by the story. They knew the accounts were solid. The threats were empty bluster, and everyone knew it. The best part, the most satisfying part, was watching the effect it had on the family dynamic. Through the security cameras, I saw the arguments. Richard was furious with Evan, not for his behavior, but for his carelessness. "I told you to be discreet," he screamed at him during a dinner I watched with grim satisfaction. "You brought this on us with your stupidity." Clara, whose own social media was being flooded with negative comments by association, was in a full-blown panic. "This is ruining my brand," she wailed. "People think we're all monsters." They started to turn on each other. The united front they presented to the world was a facade. In private, they were a nest of vipers. They suspected everyone: business rivals, disgruntled former employees, a jilted ex-girlfriend. The one person they never suspected was me. I was the joke, the blood-soaked groom, the pathetic architect they had swatted away like a fly. I was beneath their notice, and that was my greatest weapon. I was the ghost in their house, and they were so busy looking for enemies outside, they never realized the call was coming from inside the walls. The second pillar of their house of cards was starting to wobble, and I was just getting to the foundation. With their social standing in tatters, it was time to go after the source of their power, Richard's money. This was the most dangerous phase of my plan. I was no longer dealing with gossip and reputation. I was moving into the realm of financial crime. The risks were immense, but my resolve had hardened. They had taken my future. I was going to take theirs. My opening was something I had noticed months ago, while still with Clara. Richard had roped me into doing some preliminary design sketches for a small community center he was building. It was a charity project, meant to generate good PR. While looking over the site plans and zoning applications, I had seen something odd. The land for the center, located in a low-income neighborhood, had been rezoned from residential to commercial just weeks before Richard's company acquired it. The rezoning drastically increased the land's value. It seemed too convenient. At the time, I had dismissed it as a lucky break for him. Now I knew better. There was no luck in Richard's world, only leverage. I started digging. I spent my weekends at the city's municipal records office, a dusty, forgotten place filled with stacks of paper files. I pulled every document related to the community center project: land deeds, zoning board meeting minutes, permit applications. I cross-referenced them with public records of Richard's corporate holdings, a complex web of shell companies and LLCs. It was slow, painstaking work. It was like assembling a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle without the picture on the box. After weeks of searching, I found it: a tiny discrepancy in the minutes of a zoning board meeting. The motion to rezone the property was passed by a single vote. The deciding vote was cast by a board member named Arthur Vance. A few days later, I found a property transfer record. A small condo in a luxury building downtown, owned by one of Richard's shell companies, had been sold for $1 to a private trust. The trustee of that trust, Arthur Vance's wife. It was bribery hidden in plain sight. It was the loose thread. I knew if I pulled it, the whole tapestry of Richard's empire would unravel. This was my smoking gun. This single act of corruption was likely the blueprint for how he operated. He did not just build buildings, he bought cities. He manipulated the system from the inside, enriching himself at the public's expense. The community center was not a gift. It was a Trojan horse, a PR stunt to cover up a dirty land deal that had made him millions. My anger was no longer just personal. It was righteous. He was not just a bully. He was a thief, stealing from the very people he pretended to help. I scanned every document. I created a timeline. I wrote a detailed memo explaining the connection between the shell company, the condo, and the zoning vote. I compiled everything into a single, encrypted file. The ghost now had the evidence. The next step was to deliver it to someone who could use it to exorcise him from the city for good. Having the evidence was one thing. Getting it into the right hands without exposing myself was another. I could not go to the police directly. Richard had connections all over the city, including inside the police department. An anonymous tip might get buried. I needed a third party, someone with the resources to investigate and the independence to be incorruptible. The answer was obvious. I had to go back to the journalist, Anna. But I could not use the same method as before. Sending another anonymous email about the same family would create a link. They would start looking for the common denominator. I needed a new approach, one that was completely untraceable back to me. I decided to use physical media. I bought a pack of brand new, high-capacity USB drives from a big box store at a different library across town from the one I had used before. I loaded the encrypted file onto one of the drives. I wiped the library computer clean. Next, I needed to deliver it. I could not mail it. The postage could be traced. I could not leave it at her office. There were cameras everywhere. I researched her online. I found her professional biography. It mentioned she was an avid marathon runner and trained in Central City Park every morning. It was the perfect opportunity. A public place with thousands of people, where my presence would be completely anonymous. The next morning I was at the park before sunrise. I was dressed in generic running gear, a baseball cap pulled low over my face. I found a bench along her usual route and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like a scene from a spy movie. The tension was electric. After about 20 minutes I saw her. She was unmistakable, running with a focused, determined pace. As she approached, I stood up and started to jog in the same direction, a few paces behind her. My moment came when she paused at a water fountain. As she bent down to drink, I accidentally tripped and stumbled, dropping a set of keys and the USB drive near her feet. "Oh, sorry," I mumbled, not making eye contact. I quickly scooped up my keys, intentionally leaving the USB drive on the ground. "You dropped this," she said, picking it up and holding it out to me. I shook my head. "Not mine," I said, my voice disguised, a little rougher than usual. "Must belong to someone else." I gave a brief nod and jogged away, never looking back. I did not stop running for 2 miles. The package was delivered. The ghost had passed the torch. I had done everything I could. Now it was up to her. I had to trust that a good journalist's curiosity would be impossible to resist. A mysterious USB drive found in a park. She would have to look. She would have to know what was on it. The wait was agonizing. Every day I checked Anna's publication, my stomach in knots. A week passed, then 2, nothing. I started to second-guess myself. Maybe she had thrown the drive away, thinking it was a virus or a hoax. Maybe she looked at the files and did not understand their significance. Maybe Richard had gotten to her. The silence was a breeding ground for doubt and paranoia. I barely slept. I replayed the scene in the park 100 times in my head, searching for any mistake I might have made. During this time, the pressure on Clara and Evan was mounting. Evan was a social pariah. He had been forced to privatize all his social media accounts. Clara's influencer career was flatlining. Her engagement numbers were plummeting and her comment sections were still a war zone. Desperate, she launched a tearful apology video. She claimed the prank was all Evan's idea, that she was pressured into it, and that she was truly sorry for any hurt it caused. It was a transparent, self-serving performance. No one bought it. The video was ratioed into oblivion, with dislikes far outnumbering likes. I watched her pathetic attempt at damage control with a sense of detached satisfaction. Her apology was not for me. It was for her brand. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry it had backfired. She felt no real remorse. She had never once tried to contact me to apologize privately. Her silence on that front spoke volumes. Her public tears were just another form of content, another performance for her audience. Then on a Tuesday morning it happened. I opened the news site and there it was. The headline was massive, spanning the entire top of the page. City Hall for sale. Developer Richard Vance under investigation for bribery, fraud. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Anna had taken my breadcrumbs and baked a whole loaf. She had not just confirmed my findings about the community center deal. She had used it as a starting point to uncover a dozen other instances of bribery, kickbacks, and zoning manipulation, going back more than a decade. My dossier was the key that had unlocked the entire conspiracy. The story named names, including Arthur Vance and 2 other city officials. It detailed the shell companies, the illicit property transfers, the whole sordid network of corruption. It was all there, laid bare for the world to see. The city's district attorney had already launched a formal investigation. The FBI was reportedly involved. Richard's carefully constructed empire was not just wobbling anymore. It was hit by a seismic shock, and the foundation was cracking wide open. The ghost had not just haunted their house, he had set it on fire. The investigation was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, federal agents raided Richard's corporate headquarters and his home. The images were on every news channel. Boxes of documents being carried out of the pristine, soulless mansion I remembered so well. Richard, stone-faced, leaving his office surrounded by a phalanx of lawyers, bombarded by a storm of reporters' questions. He was charged with bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The city officials he had bribed were also indicted. Arthur Vance, the man whose vote had been bought with a condo, cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. He gave them everything. Richard's assets were frozen. His lines of credit were cut off. His business partners deserted him. The empire he had spent a lifetime building was dismantled in a matter of weeks. The trial was a public spectacle. The prosecution laid out an airtight case, built on the documents I had provided and the testimony of the people Richard had corrupted. He was portrayed as a predator who treated the city's laws as mere suggestions, a cancer on the body politic. His defense was weak, arrogant, and ineffective. He was convicted on all counts. The judge, making an example of him, sentenced him to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The impact on the family was devastating. With their assets frozen and Richard's reputation destroyed, the money dried up. The mansion was seized to pay off fines and restitution. The luxury cars were repossessed. The endless stream of cash that had fueled their entire lifestyle was gone. Clara and her mother were forced to move into a small, rented townhouse in a middle-class suburb. Evan, already a social outcast, was now also broke. He had no skills, no real work experience. His only asset had been his father's name, and that name was now synonymous with crime and disgrace. He ended up taking a low-level sales job at a car dealership, a humiliating downfall for the man who saw himself as a king. I followed all of this from a distance, an anonymous spectator to the demolition I had engineered. I felt a grim sense of justice, a cold satisfaction in seeing them brought low. They had built their world on a foundation of cruelty and corruption, and I had simply exposed it to the light. The structure could not stand the scrutiny. It had collapsed under the weight of its own rotten core, but my project was not quite finished. There was one more person I needed to see, one final conversation I needed to have. A few months after Richard's sentencing, I decided it was time to see Clara. I did not want revenge anymore. I was not looking for an apology. I needed closure. I needed to see her, face to face, in the aftermath of the world I had unmade. I wanted to look her in the eye and know for myself that I was truly free of her. I found her working as a cashier at a high-end grocery store. The irony was not lost on me. The woman who once scoffed at last season's handbags was now scanning artisanal cheeses for women who were just like she used to be. I waited until her shift was over. I saw her walk out of the store, wearing a plain coat, her face devoid of makeup, her vibrant energy completely gone. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. I approached her in the parking lot. "Clara," I said. My voice was calm and even. She flinched, her head snapping up. Her eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment there was fear in them. Then it was replaced by a familiar look of resentment. "What do you want, Liam?" she asked, her voice brittle. "I just wanted to see how you were," I said. It was a lie, but it was the only opening I could think of. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "How I am? How do you think I am? My father is in prison, my family has lost everything, we're ruined, and you come here to gloat." "I'm not gloating," I said, and to my surprise I realized it was true. The intense satisfaction I had felt watching from afar was gone. In its place was a strange sense of emptiness. I just had a question. "What?" she snapped. I looked at her, at the person I once thought I would spend my life with. I saw the shell of a woman hollowed out by the loss of her privilege. "Was any of it real?" I asked. "The 2 years we spent together, our plans, the life we were supposed to build, was any of it ever real to you?" She looked away, staring at the gray pavement. For a long time she said nothing. The parking lot lights flickered on, casting long shadows around us. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought it was, at first. You were stable, you were decent. I thought that's what I wanted, a real life. But when it came down to it, I couldn't do it. My family, they have a certain way of seeing the world. You didn't fit. You were never going to be enough for them." She looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something that looked like genuine regret. "The prank," she said. "It was supposed to just be a way to push you away, to make you leave so I didn't have to be the bad guy. It got out of control. Evan took it too far." "You filmed it, Clara," I said, my voice flat. "You filmed it and you posted it for the world to see." Her face crumpled. "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry." The words I had once longed to hear now felt hollow. They were too little, too late. "It wasn't a prank," I said, the finality of it settling between us. "It was a character assassination. You all just misjudged your target's character." She looked at me, confused. "What does that mean?" I did not answer her question directly. I just gave her a small, sad smile. "Goodbye, Clara." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the fading light of the parking lot. I did not need to tell her it was me. I did not need her to know the details of my revenge. The closure I was seeking was not in her apology or her understanding. It was in my own ability to walk away, to leave her and her ruined world behind me, and to finally, truly be done. The walk back to my car was different from every other journey I had taken over the past year. The weight that had been sitting on my chest, the cold knot of anger that had become my constant companion, was gone. Seeing Clara, not as the monster from my nightmares, but as a small, broken person, had been the final act of my own liberation. She was no longer a symbol of my humiliation. She was just a woman who had made a series of terrible choices and was now living with the consequences. My feelings for her were not love or hate. It was a profound and complete indifference. When I got home, I went through my apartment and collected every piece of my revenge: the burner phone, the encrypted hard drives, the notebooks filled with my research. I put them all in a box. I drove to the industrial part of town, to an incinerator I knew was used for secure document disposal. I paid the fee in cash and watched as the box was fed into the flames. I stood there until I was sure everything was turned to ash. The ghost of the blood-soaked groom was gone. Liam, the architect, was all that was left. The next day at work, something had shifted in me. For the first time in a year, I looked at a set of blueprints and felt a spark of creativity, a desire to build something new. The fog had lifted completely. My boss called me into his office. He told me he was impressed with my resilience and dedication through a difficult personal time. He offered me a promotion. I would be the lead architect on a new project, a public library for a suburban community. A place for knowledge, for quiet contemplation, for building community. It was the perfect project. It was a chance to build something positive, something that would last. I called Sam and told him the news. "That's amazing, man," he said, his voice filled with genuine happiness for me. "You deserve it. We went out for a drink that night to celebrate. You know," he said, swirling the ice in his glass, "I was worried about you for a while there. That look in your eye, it was dark. I'm glad to see it's gone." I nodded. "It is," I said. "I finally realized that revenge is a cage. You build it to trap someone else, but you're the one who has to live inside it, feeding it every day. I'm done living in a cage." We talked for hours about work, about the future, about everything except them. Their names were not mentioned. Their chapter in my life was closed, the book placed back on the shelf. As I walked home that night through the quiet city streets, I felt a sense of peace I had not felt in years. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and survived. I had walked through the fire of my own rage and come out the other side, not unscathed, but whole. I had demolished a house built on lies. Now, it was time to start drawing the blueprints for my own. The library project became my sanctuary. I poured all my energy into it. I worked long hours, sketching designs, building models, collaborating with my team. The work was demanding, but it was fulfilling. It was creation, not destruction. Each line I drew, each beam I placed in the design, felt like a deliberate act of rebuilding my own life. I was creating a space for light and knowledge. A direct contrast to the world of shadows and deceit I had inhabited for so long. One afternoon, I was at the proposed library site taking soil samples with the engineering team. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello." The voice on the other end was hesitant, professional. "Is this Liam?" "It is," I said. "My name is Detective Miller," the man said. "I'm with the city's financial crimes unit. I'm calling about the Richard Vance case. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to speak with me." A jolt of cold fear shot through me. My mind raced. Had they found something? A digital breadcrumb I had missed? Had Anna given them my name? I forced my voice to remain steady. "The Vance case, I'm not sure how I can help. I only know what I've read in the papers." "We understand," Detective Miller said. "But your name came up. We know about your previous relationship with his daughter, Clara. We also know about the incident at your rehearsal dinner." My heart was hammering against my ribs. "What about it?" I asked. "Well," he said, and I could almost hear the careful consideration in his voice. "The initial tip that broke this case wide open came from an anonymous source. A very thorough, very well-organized source. We've never been able to identify them, but I have a theory. My theory is that someone pushed Richard Vance, and he fell over. I think that same someone had access to his life, his business. Someone who was smart, meticulous, and had a very strong motive." There was a long pause. I did not speak. I let the silence hang in the air. "Look," Miller continued, his tone softening slightly. "I'm not trying to jam you up. Officially, the ghost that handed us this case is a hero. They did this city a great service. I'm not looking to make an arrest. I'm just a curious man. The person who put that file together knew exactly what they were doing. They were almost architectural in their precision." I took a deep breath, the smell of damp earth filling my lungs. I made a decision. I would not lie, but I would not confess. "Detective," I said, my voice firm and clear. "What happened to that family was a tragedy of their own making. They built their house on a rotten foundation. I'm not surprised it collapsed." Miller was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled softly. "Fair enough, Liam. A good architect knows his foundations. Thank you for your time." He hung up. I stood there for a long time, looking out over the empty field where a library would soon stand. He knew. He did not have proof, but he knew. And he did not care. The system had worked, even if it had needed a push from a ghost. Life began to find a new, quiet rhythm. The library project progressed, moving from blueprints to construction. Seeing the foundation being poured, the steel frame rising against the sky, was a profound experience. It was a tangible symbol of my own recovery. I was building again. I started dating cautiously at first. I met a woman named Sarah, a landscape designer who was consulting on the library's green spaces. She was calm, kind, and funny. She knew my name was Liam, the architect, not Liam, the viral video victim. My past was not a secret, but it was not the first thing people knew about me anymore. The memory of the prank was fading from the public consciousness, replaced by newer, more immediate scandals. I was becoming anonymous again, and I treasured it. Sarah and I took things slow. Our dates were simple. Walks in the park, visits to museums, cooking dinner at her apartment. It was normal, it was healthy. It was everything my relationship with Clara had not been. There was no performance, no curation for an unseen audience. There was just us. One evening we were sitting on her balcony watching the sunset. "You're a very serious person sometimes," she said, not as a criticism but as an observation. "It's like you're carrying something heavy." I knew I could not build a future with her on a foundation that had secrets, so I told her. I told her everything, about Clara, the prank, the video, the humiliation. And then I told her about the revenge. I laid out the whole story, every dark, calculated step. I did not try to justify it. I just presented the facts. I was terrified she would be horrified, that she would see me as a monster, as someone who was just as cruel as they were. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. She looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not going to tell you it was the right thing to do," she said finally. "But I understand why you did it. They tried to erase you. You just wrote a different ending to the story." She reached out and took my hand. "It doesn't define you, Liam. It's a part of your past. It's not who you are now." In that moment, I felt a release that was even more profound than when I had walked away from Clara in the parking lot. I had been seen, in my entirety, with all my flaws and darkness, and I had not been rejected. I had been accepted. It was the truest form of closure I could have ever hoped for. 2 years after the rehearsal dinner, the library was ready for its grand opening. It was a beautiful building, all clean lines, natural wood, and vast windows that flooded the space with light. It was the best thing I had ever designed. I stood in the back of the crowd during the dedication ceremony, listening to the mayor and other local dignitaries give speeches. I was not looking for credit. The building itself was credit enough. Sam was there standing beside me. "You did it, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's incredible." I just nodded, a feeling of deep, quiet pride settling over me. After the ceremony, as people were mingling and exploring the new library, I saw a familiar face. It was Detective Miller. He was out of uniform, looking like any other citizen. He walked over to me, a small smile on his face. "I had a feeling I might see you here," he said. "It's a beautiful building, Liam, a real asset to the community." "Thank you, Detective," I replied. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching children run excitedly towards the new story time area. "You know," he said, his voice low, "Richard Vance comes up for parole in a few years. He won't get it, not the first time, but he'll get out eventually. A lot of people are still angry at him. They feel he got what he deserved." He looked at me directly. "What about you? Are you angry anymore?" I thought about his question. I thought about the rage that had fueled me for a year. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a story about a different person. "No," I said, and the honesty of the word surprised me. "I'm not angry. Anger is a fire that burns you from the inside out. I'm just grateful, grateful to be here, grateful to be building things instead of tearing them down." Miller nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "That's good to hear," he said. "This city needs more builders." He shook my hand and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I never saw him again. I knew the conversation was his way of closing the file, not just on the case, but on me. He had seen the man I had become, and he approved. Later that evening, Sarah and I walked through the empty library after everyone had gone home. The moonlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the rows and rows of books. It was silent, peaceful. It felt sacred. "It's a masterpiece," she whispered. I put my arm around her. We stood there, looking at the testament to a new beginning, a structure built not on revenge or anger, but on the quiet, resilient hope for a better future. I was finally home. Years passed. Life became a collection of good, solid, ordinary moments. Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony in the garden behind the library I had built. Our vows were not about forever, but about every day. We bought a house, a modest fixer-upper that we slowly renovated together, our tool belts side by side. It was a home filled with laughter, the smell of sawdust, and the warmth of a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. I continued my work as an architect, finding joy in creating spaces that served people: schools, community centers, affordable housing. My work had a purpose that went beyond aesthetics. It was about building the framework for people's lives. I never became famous and I never got rich, but I was content. My life was my own, built to my own specifications. Every Halloween, a strange thing would happen. The video of my humiliation would resurface on social media. It had become a piece of internet lore, a classic cringe clip that a new generation would discover and share. For the first few years, seeing it pop up would give me a faint, ghostly pang of the old shame. But over time, it lost its power. The man in the video, drenched and broken, was a stranger to me. He was a character in a story, and I was the author who had written him a better ending. I never heard from Clara or Evan again. I did not seek out news of them. They were ghosts of a past I no longer visited. Their downfall had been the catalyst for my transformation, but they were not the story. The story was about what happens after the demolition. It was about the slow, patient work of clearing the rubble and building something new in its place. It was about discovering that the strongest foundations are not made of concrete and steel, but of integrity, resilience, and the quiet courage to start again. Revenge gave me a sense of justice, but it did not give me peace. Peace came later. It came from the work of my hands, from the love of a good woman, from the simple act of building a life that was honest and true. They had tried to make my worst moment my entire identity, but I learned that you are not defined by the moments that break you. You are defined by how you choose to put the pieces back together. I had put my pieces back together, not in the same shape as before, but into something stronger, more authentic, and infinitely more beautiful. My name is Liam. I am an architect. I build things that are meant to last. Today I am not building with steel or glass. I am sitting on a park bench, watching my son learn to ride his bike. He wobbles, he falls, and he gets back up, a look of fierce determination on his face. He is resilient. He is a testament to a future I never thought I would have. The story of what happened to me is a dark one, a tale of betrayal and meticulously planned retribution. For a long time, the fire of that revenge was the only thing that kept me warm. I believed that their destruction was the only path to my own salvation. I was wrong. The satisfaction of watching them fall was real, but it was fleeting. It was like a powerful drug that left me feeling empty when it wore off. True victory was not the day Richard was sentenced. It was not the day Clara apologized in a parking lot. It was the day I sat across from the woman I loved, laid bare the darkest parts of my soul, and was met not with judgment, but with understanding. It was the day I realized that the life I was building was more important than the one I had destroyed. They tried to define me by a single moment of spectacular humiliation. They made me a public joke, but their greatest mistake was thinking the story ended there. I learned that you hold the pen to your own life story. You can let others write your ending, or you can pick up the pen and write one yourself. My revenge was not just about tearing them down. It was about taking back the narrative. So I built a new story, a story of resilience, a story of quiet purpose, a story filled with love and light and the simple joy of watching a child learn to find his balance. They thought they were the main characters. They ended up as nothing more than the prologue to a much better book. The line between justice and revenge is incredibly thin. It is easy to believe that making someone pay for the pain they caused will heal you. But sometimes, the focus on their downfall just keeps you tethered to the very trauma you are trying to escape. Have you ever had to walk away from a fight to truly win? Share your experience in the comments below.